The morning light cut across the garage as Jack hauled dusty boxes toward the bin. Coffee still warm in his veins, he didn't expect the jolt that came when Rusty, his 12-year-old golden retriever, lunged at him. The old dog's teeth grazed his wrist, not in anger, but in fierce warning. Jack froze. Rusty planted himself over a beat-up cardboard box, paw pressing it like treasure. Jack's heart raced. This was no ordinary growl, no playful tug of war. Rusty's eyes locked on his, steady, pleading, almost desperate. Jack's chest tightened. Rusty had never bitten in his life, not once in 12 loyal years. Whatever was in that box mattered more to Rusty than anything Jack could remember. The air thickened around them, the garage suddenly less cluttered with junk and more alive with a mystery that had waited years to be uncovered. Jack backed away, cradling his scraped wrist, eyes on the box Rusty guarded like sacred ground. He called Susan, his sister, words tumbling out in disbelief. "He bit me over a box." Her voice came calm but insistent. "Don't throw it out, let Rusty keep it." Jack sighed, brushing dust from his palms. He crouched, studying the box. Damp cardboard, sagging corners, no label. Rusty's paw pressed firm, chest heaving as if every breath mattered. The weight of years hung heavy, like this wasn't garbage at all, but something buried beneath memory. Jack felt his pulse quicken. What could be inside? Old junk? Forgotten trash? Or something tied to the ache that still lingered from Dad's passing years ago? Rusty's growl softened into silence, his brown eyes pleading without words. Jack swallowed hard. The box was no longer trash. It was a key Rusty refused to let go.
By evening, Jack gave in. He slid across the floor toward Rusty, inch by inch. The dog didn't move this time, only shifted his paw aside as if granting permission. Jack peeled back damp cardboard, the sound brittle in the still air. Inside lay a red flannel blanket, folded tight, its fibers carrying a smell that hit like a wave. Dad's truck, old camping trips, windows down on back roads. Rusty whimpered low, nudging the fabric with his nose, tail thumping once in recognition. Beneath the blanket, Jack found a squeaky squirrel toy, worn smooth by teeth. Rusty pressed it gently, a faint squeak escaping. Jack's throat tightened. At the bottom, wrapped in yellowed paper, lay Dad's watch, the one they thought lost forever. Jack's hands shook. Rusty leaned closer as though to remind him nothing had been forgotten. Not by him, not by the box, not by love. Tears blurred Jack's eyes as he held the blanket to his chest. But Rusty wasn't finished. His paw pressed again at the box, urging him deeper. Jack unfolded layers of brittle paper until a tin box clinked against the floor. Its lid, tarnished with time, creaked open beneath his thumb. Inside were letters. Dad's handwriting instantly recognizable, looping, steady, filled with the voice Jack had missed every day since the funeral. The first envelope trembled in his grip. Rusty whined, pressing his muzzle against Jack's arm, urging him forward. The letter spoke of memories, of trails not yet walked, of places marked by love. And at the bottom, scrawled in Dad's familiar ink, "Follow Rusty when you forget who you are." Jack's breath caught. Rusty had never let go of the past. Now, through a box of memories, Jack was being pulled back into it.
That night, Jack spread the contents across the living room floor, the fire crackling low in the hearth. Rusty lay curled against the flannel, the squeaky squirrel pressed between his paws. Jack flipped open the photo album, sealed in plastic, pages stiff with time. There, an image of a fireplace not from their home, but from a cabin he didn't remember. His father sat in the recliner, Jack as a child on his lap. Rusty barely a puppy tucked against him. The stone mantle behind them held a painting of mountains over a lake. Jack frowned. He didn't know this place. He snapped a photo, sending it to Susan. Minutes later, her reply buzzed back. Grandpa Charlie's cabin in Pinefield. Forgotten, but waiting. Jack looked at Rusty. The dog's ears perked at the name. The trail was already opening, and Rusty was ready to lead. 2 days later, Jack steered his pickup north, Rusty riding shotgun, head high, eyes bright despite his age. Pines thickened along the roadside as memories stirred like ghosts in the air. They reached Pinefield by noon, the old gravel drive crunching beneath the tires. The cabin stood weathered, moss crawling along the shingles, but solid, like a sentinel from their past. Rusty leapt down first, padding straight to the front steps as if he had never forgotten. Jack's chest ached as he unlocked the door. Inside smelled of cedar and dust, beams catching light like old secrets. Rusty padded to the stone fireplace and sat, eyes fixed above the mantel. Jack followed his gaze to the painting. His pulse quickened. This was the photo. This was where Dad's letter had pointed. And somehow, Rusty had remembered the way back, long before Jack did.
Rusty pawed at the hearthstones, claws scraping gently until Jack knelt beside him. His fingers traced the wood frame of the mountain painting. He tugged carefully and it lifted free, revealing a hollow carved behind the wall. Inside sat a tin box, untouched for years. Jack's hands shook as he opened it, finding more letters, more pieces of his father's voice preserved like treasure. The first spoke of Pinefield summers, of building forts, of laughing at Rusty's puppy clumsiness. But hidden deeper was something else, a note written just weeks before Dad's last hike. If you forget, follow Rusty. He knows the way back. Jack's throat closed. He looked down at Rusty, who sat proud, tail sweeping the floor slowly, eyes never leaving him. Jack realized then, this wasn't chance. Rusty wasn't just guarding a box. He had been guarding an entire map of love. That evening, Jack sat on the old recliner, the letters spread across his lap. The fire hissed low, throwing shadows across the cabin walls. Rusty lay curled at his feet, chest rising steady, guarding as he always had. Jack read slowly, Dad's words painting trails through memory, advice, jokes, and hidden clues. One letter spoke of the secret log clearing, the place Dad called the memory spot. Jack's pulse stirred. He remembered faintly, but Rusty seemed to recall more. At dawn, Jack clipped the leash, but hardly needed it. Rusty trotted ahead, nose down, moving with purpose. They passed pines heavy with morning mist until Rusty stopped at a fallen log half swallowed by moss. Beneath its roots, a rusted tin lunchbox waited. Jack pried it open. Inside, a childish scrawl in blue crayon, Rusty's Adventure Club. Jack laughed through tears. The dog had led him home.
Jack sat on the mossy log, tears streaking his face as the memory pressed in. The box contained drawings, scribbled maps, and a note from Dad folded carefully. If you find this, it means you still believe in magic. Jack's hand trembled. Rusty nudged his leg, curling beside him with a grunt, eyes closing as if relieved the treasure had been found. For hours, Jack sat in the quiet clearing, surrounded by towering pines, the air alive with birdsong and the weight of yesterday. It wasn't just paper, not just scraps. It was proof that his father had woven this trail with purpose. And Rusty, even in age, had remembered every step of it. Jack pressed his forehead against the dog's head, the world narrowing to the bond they shared. This wasn't a scavenger hunt. It was a love story written across time. Night fell, and Jack built a fire in the cabin hearth. Rusty sprawled on the flannel blanket, the squeaky toy resting near his paw. Jack cradled Dad's watch in his palm, its surface catching the firelight. It wasn't ticking, but it didn't matter. The weight of it was enough. Jack whispered thanks into the quiet, unsure if it was to Rusty, to Dad, or to both. The letters lay stacked on the table, each one pointing forward, each one promising more. But for now, silence felt holy. Jack stretched out on the couch, exhaustion pressing his body, and let the glow of fire and the steady presence of Rusty wrap him in warmth. The journey had only begun, but already the box had become more than cardboard. It had become a bridge, a way back to a father, through a dog who never forgot.
Morning sunlight streamed through the cabin windows as Jack packed the letters into his bag. Rusty stretched, joints stiff but eyes bright, ready for more. Jack opened one note he hadn't yet read. "If you find still water, check the north dock." His pulse quickened. He remembered faintly a summer trip long ago, a photo by a wooden boathouse. Within hours, they were on the road, Rusty riding with his head out the window, ears flapping. The lake shimmered blue as they arrived, its surface rippling like memory itself. Rusty trotted down the dock, stopping at the end and pawing the boards. Jack knelt, prying loose a small wooden box wedged beneath. Inside was an envelope, Dad's handwriting scrawled across it. Jack opened it slowly. "Keep following, son. You'll find me in the places Rusty remembers." Jack's throat tightened. Rusty barked once, as if to confirm. On the dock, the lake breeze stirred Jack's hair as he unfolded the second item from the box, an old Polaroid. His younger self stood barefoot on the same dock, Rusty a small puppy splashing in the water beside him, Dad's shadow stretching across the frame. On the back, in faded ink, "You said this was the day you'd always trust Rusty. Never forget that." Jack's chest clenched. He sat on the dock edge, feet dangling over the water, while Rusty lay beside him, muzzle on Jack's lap. For the first time in years, Jack felt time collapse. Dad's words, Rusty's loyalty, and his own forgotten vow wove together like a net, holding him steady. He whispered, "I never should have forgotten." Rusty gave a low, contented sigh. The box wasn't just leading them, it was stitching past and present into one heartbeat.
Driving home from Stillwater, Jack couldn't shake the feeling there was more waiting. His suspicion proved right when another letter, tucked inside the tin, mentioned the old backyard. Jack's breath caught. Their childhood home had been sold years ago. Would the new owner even let him in? He hesitated at the curb, the house both familiar and strange with its new paint and shutters. Rusty leapt down, padding directly toward the backyard gate. Jack followed nervously. To his surprise, the owner, Ray, emerged from the porch, kind eyes behind wire-framed glasses. "You're Jack, aren't you?" Ray asked gently. "I've seen this old dog by the tree out back more than once. Figured he belonged here." Jack's throat closed. Rusty had remembered the yard all along. Ray nodded toward the garden. "If he's digging, let him. Some things are meant to be found." Rusty pawed furiously at the earth beneath the tree stump where his childhood treehouse once stood. Jack dropped to his knees, scooping soil until metal scraped against his fingers. He pulled free a rusted chest, hinges stiff but intact. Inside lay drawings on faded paper, a baseball glove stiff with age, and a notebook tied with twine. The cover read, "Rusty's Journal." Jack's hands trembled as he opened the first page. His father's handwriting spilled across it, day-by-day memories of Jack growing up, always with Rusty by his side. First days of school, nights by campfires, inside jokes, even silly sketches of Rusty stealing socks. Tears blurred the words. Jack hugged the book against his chest, breath ragged. Rusty pressed close, tail brushing dirt, eyes soft. The ground beneath them wasn't just soil, it was history, patiently waiting to be uncovered by love.
That night, Jack and Rusty stayed at a small roadside motel. The notebook lay open across the bed, pages crackling with years of preserved memory. One entry hit hardest. Rusty guards your joy like it's his job. If you ever lose your way, follow him. He'll bring you home. Jack wiped his eyes, looking at Rusty curled beside him, paws tucked under the old flannel blanket. The dog's breathing was slow, steady, and certain. Jack realized Rusty wasn't just leading him through places, they were retracing an entire life his father wanted him to hold on to. The motel walls faded into silence, the hum of traffic outside forgotten. All Jack heard was the gentle rhythm of Rusty's breath, the echo of his father's voice on paper, and the undeniable truth that this journey was not about finding things, it was about remembering love. The next clue came from another page tucked into the journal, a fairground ribbon. Jack's heart skipped. He remembered faintly entering Rusty into a dog tricks contest as a boy. They drove out the next morning, reaching the abandoned fairgrounds by noon. Empty booths lined the lot, their paint peeling, silence heavy. Rusty tugged the leash gently toward a crooked red booth. Jack followed, heart pounding. Behind it, hidden under weeds and dirt, they uncovered a plastic bin sealed with duct tape. Inside was the ribbon. Still bright, still intact. Beneath it, a photograph of Jack as a boy, Rusty mid-jump beside him, both caught in joy. On the back, Dad's handwriting. This was the day you wanted to make dogs proud. You already did. Jack collapsed to his knees, clutching the ribbon. Rusty wagged his tail softly, as though proud once more.
Jack sat cross-legged on the gravel, ribbon pressed to his chest. Rusty curled beside him, paw on Jack's knee, eyes reflecting trust. For a long time, Jack couldn't move. The fairground ghosts seemed alive. The laughter of children, the bark of dogs, the booming voice of his father cheering. It all replayed in his head, sharper than any dream. Jack whispered, "You remembered every step, didn't you?" Rusty gave a low grunt, his tail brushing the dirt like punctuation. The photograph, the ribbon, the words on the back, they weren't just mementos. They were payoffs from promises Dad had left behind, promises Rusty had carried like sacred duties. Jack looked at the dog, chest swelling. "You never forgot who I was," he murmured. And in that moment, Jack realized he wasn't just rediscovering his father, he was rediscovering himself through Rusty's eyes. Another letter directed them to an overlook off Route 14. Jack drove in silence, memories swirling like dust in sunlight. When they arrived, the valley below stretched wide, quilted in green and gold. Jack sat on the stone bench while Rusty pressed close, tail thumping once. He unfolded the letter. "This was where I realized I couldn't stop time. You and Rusty were growing too fast. I wanted to pause everything, but life doesn't pause, it moves. Remember to notice the view." Jack's throat tightened. He looked out across the valley, sunlight glinting like pieces of eternity. Rusty leaned against him, body warm and steady, grounding him in the present. Jack whispered, "We're still here, Dad. We noticed." For a long while, they simply breathed together, overlooking the view his father had once held, now passed down like an heirloom of memory. That night, Jack didn't book a room. Instead, he spread a sleeping bag in the truck bed, stars sharp above them. Rusty climbed up slowly, joints stiff, but settled beside him with a sigh. Jack read another passage from the notebook, aloud by flashlight. Some memories aren't meant to be kept in boxes. They're meant to be lived again, even if only in stories. Rusty shifted closer, head resting on Jack's chest, heartbeat slow and steady. Jack closed the notebook, staring at the night sky. Every constellation seemed to whisper pieces of the past, threads weaving father, son, and dog into one tapestry. Jack pressed his hand into Rusty's fur,
whispering thanks into the dark. Rusty's ears twitched at the sound, tail wagging faintly. They didn't need walls tonight. Memory itself was their shelter, stars their roof, and love their fire. Morning came with Rusty's wet nose nudging Jack awake. The dog's tail wagged slow, but his eyes gleamed with purpose. Another letter remained in the tin, marked with his father's handwriting. Go to the trail we never finished, Miller's Trail, completed with Rusty. Jack swallowed hard. He remembered one summer cut short by a broken-down car. They'd never walked that path together. Now, decades later, the chance had returned. The trailhead sign stood weathered but proud, the forest beyond alive with sunlight. Rusty padded forward with surprising energy, paws steady on the dirt. Jack followed, heart heavy yet light all at once. With every step, the crunch of gravel beneath boots and paws became more than sound. It was a rhythm, a drumbeat of unfinished journeys finally being walked. Father and son united through the loyal guide who never forgot.
The trail wound upward, pines whispering overhead. Jack paused often, taking in the view his father once longed to share. Rusty led the way with unshakable certainty, ears pricked, tail swaying like a metronome. Halfway up, they reached a weathered bench carved with initials. Rusty stopped, nose twitching, before veering off into a thicket of blackberry vines. Jack followed, ducking under branches until they stumbled into a circular clearing. At its center sat a flat stone, and on top, a mason jar capped in red wax. Jack unscrewed it, hands trembling. Inside was a tiny camping compass and a note in his father's handwriting. You always knew the way. Love isn't the destination, it's the walk itself. Jack pressed the compass into his palm. Rusty sat proudly beside him, chest rising steady, as if confirming that they had finally arrived. They lingered in the clearing, sunlight pouring through the canopy like golden rain. Jack turned the compass in his hand, watching the needle twitch toward north. Rusty stretched out in the grass, eyes half closed but still alert, as though he too understood the weight of the moment. Jack whispered, "We finished it, Dad." The air felt heavier, filled with memories and echoes of laughter long gone. Rusty shifted closer, resting his chin against Jack's knee, tail brushing the earth in slow rhythm. Jack realized the compass wasn't meant to guide him anywhere physical. It was meant to remind him that as long as Rusty walked beside him, he was never lost. He sat in silence, hand pressed into Rusty's fur, heart swelling with both grief and gratitude. In that quiet, the past and present finally felt stitched together into one unbroken line. They returned to the cabin late that afternoon. Dust rose behind the truck as Jack parked beneath the sagging porch. Inside, the old flannel blanket laid draped across the couch, waiting. Jack sat heavily, Rusty curling beside him with a satisfied sigh. Pulling the notebook from his bag, Jack flipped to the last pages. There, drawn in crude but familiar pencil strokes, was a rough map marking each place they had visited. Stillwater, the old house, the fairgrounds, the overlook, Miller's Trail. Each spot circled with a red X. At the bottom, his father's note read, "Toby did what I couldn't. He stayed. He remembered. He brought you back." Jack pressed the page against his chest, throat tight. Rusty leaned into him, body warm, eyes glowing with quiet devotion. They weren't just revisiting places. They were completing a story written in love. Jack decided to drive north the next day to one last location marked faintly on the map. The childhood treehouse, hidden deep in the woods near their family's old cabin.
Rusty's tail wagged the moment the truck turned onto the dirt road, as if memory guided him. The treehouse stood weathered but upright, rope ladder replaced by someone's careful hands. Jack climbed cautiously, heart pounding. Inside, the walls were scribbled with faded drawings, dinosaurs, rockets, clumsy stick figures of Dad, Jack, and Rusty. In the corner sat a shoebox, sealed in duct tape. Jack peeled it open. Inside lay the final treasure, a folded sheet with the same handwriting as every letter. The real treasure isn't what you found. It's who has walked beside you all along. Jack's eyes blurred with tears. Down below, Rusty waited, tail wagging faintly in the dirt.
Jack sat on the floor of the treehouse, shoebox open, staring at the note. He realized every trail, every clue, every rediscovered memory wasn't meant to bring him back to places. It was meant to bring him back to himself. Rusty, patient and steady below, had been his compass all along. Jack pressed the paper to his lips before folding it gently into his pocket. Climbing down, he found Rusty lying in the shade, chest rising and falling with calm certainty. Jack dropped beside him, arms wrapped tight around the dog's sturdy frame. "You did it, buddy," he whispered. Rusty gave a soft grunt, leaning heavier into Jack's chest. For a long while, they stayed like that, the woods silent around them, time suspended. The shoebox treasures weren't just relics, they were the proof that love remembers even when people forget. That night at the cabin, Jack built a fire in the hearth. Rusty lay close, his muzzle streaked with gray but eyes bright in the firelight. Jack opened the final unopened envelope his father had left. The words were brief but enough to unravel him. When the journey ends, don't cry for what's gone. Sit with him and know you were never alone. Jack read it twice, then folded it carefully. He slid onto the rug beside Rusty, resting his head against the dog's broad shoulder. Rusty turned slightly, pressing his chin onto Jack's arm, breath warm, steady, alive. Outside, the wind rattled pine branches, but inside, time stilled. Jack realized the greatest gift his father had left wasn't the compass, the maps, or the letters. It was the dog lying beside him, the guardian of memory who had carried him home.
The following morning, dawn painted the cabin in gold. Rusty was slower to rise, his movements deliberate, but his eyes still sparked with purpose. Jack cooked scrambled eggs, sharing half with him like always. After breakfast, they sat on the porch overlooking the valley. Birds darted between trees, and the wind carried the smell of cedar. Rusty pressed against Jack's side, tail swishing softly. Jack began recording into his phone, reading aloud passages from the notebook, telling Rusty's story as though narrating for the world. "You led me here," Jack said, voice steady though his eyes brimmed. Rusty gave a faint wag, resting his head on Jack's lap. The dog's body trembled with age, but his spirit felt eternal. Jack stroked his fur slowly, promising that every step, every clue, every memory would now live forever, shared, remembered, never lost again. By afternoon, Rusty seemed tired, his breaths heavier. Jack carried the flannel blanket outside to the clearing behind the cabin, laying it across soft grass. Rusty lay down slowly, stretching across the blanket with a deep sigh. Jack sat cross-legged beside him, the compass and ribbon in his lap, relics now turned into talismans. He whispered stories, recounting their trail, each place they'd rediscovered, each lesson his father had hidden. Rusty listened in silence, eyes fixed on Jack, tail twitching faintly at familiar names. Jack finally said, "You didn't just save Dad's treasures. You saved me." His voice cracked. Rusty shifted, pressing his muzzle into Jack's chest, breath warm against his heart. Jack bent low, holding him close, tears falling into Rusty's fur. In that moment, every twist, every rehook, every letter paid off in the simplest truth. Love had endured.
The sky deepened with dusk, painting the cabin in soft blues and pinks. Jack stayed with Rusty on the blanket, unwilling to move, unwilling to waste a second. The final letter echoed in his mind. Sit with him. That's love. He stroked Rusty's fur slowly, whispering, "You're my compass, my map, my home." Rusty's breath slowed, eyes half closing, but his tail wagged once more, a soft thump against the earth. Jack pressed his forehead against Rusty's, inhaling his familiar scent, memorizing it like scripture. The woods around them hushed, as though the entire world paused to witness. Jack realized this wasn't just an ending. It was a circle completed, a promise kept, a life fully remembered. He didn't cry yet. He simply held on, whispering thank yous into the dog's fur, knowing Rusty had carried his father's legacy farther than words ever could. The next morning broke clear and still. Rusty stirred, tail wagging faintly, eyes soft but shining. Jack carried him gently to the trailhead where their journey had begun. There, under the same pines, he spread the blanket once more and laid out the compass, the ribbon, and the journal. He sat beside Rusty, no more searching, no more letters. Just silence, just love. Rusty nestled against his chest, releasing one deep, contented sigh before drifting into rest. Jack cradled him, eyes wet but heart full. "You led me home," he whispered. Hours later, as the sun arched high, Jack buried Rusty beneath the clearing, placing the compass and ribbon beside him. He stood long after, wind rushing through the trees, carrying with it not grief but gratitude. The payoff was simple. Rusty had guarded joy until the end, and love remained eternal.